deep in the heart of Central Texas, it's the Best of the Outdoors podcast, brought to you by Texas Fish and Game Magazine, the voice of the Texas outdoor nation. I'm your host, Dustin Von Warnke, author, outdoor writer, videographer, speaker, blogger, and podcaster. And I'm so excited that you took the opportunity to download our show or stream it. However you are listening, thank you so much for doing so. Well, it's that time of the week again, and we are back with another podcast every other week like we always do. And I am really excited about today's show because I've got a past guest of the Best of the Outdoors podcast on, and that is Marty McIntyre. He is the head guide and owner of GarQuest Bowfishing Adventures out of Central Texas. And Marty has been bow fishing since the mid-1980s and is just a great mentor of mine in bow fishing. He is a great bow fishing guide, a great teacher, a great clinician in bow fishing, and I'm really excited to share this with you because we initially did a podcast together back in 2012 before this podcast was ever together for the Hunting Channel Online, and we did a series called The Interviews with the Masters. And it was a really good interview that we did together. I posted it, I think, around show number 2 or 3 when this podcast got up and going originally. And the issue was I put it on Marty's website, garquest.com, and I was sitting there going, wow, I've never seen numbers like these before. Out of all the podcasts I've done, the 20-something podcasts that we've done on the show, I've never had one that kicked up quite that much in streaming plays. It has over 4,500 streaming plays, that original episode that we did. And I was just blown away by it because I was like, wow, this is amazing. People are really engaged with this guy and really engaged with this content. And so far, that almost accounts for half of our streaming plays on the show, because it was on his website and people go by his website to listen to the podcast player, and that's a neat way to share the podcast with folks, is with the podcast player embed code. So I'm really excited about this episode because we talk about tilapia, we talk about grass carp, we talk about carp and gar and all kinds of different bow fishing trips that you can take, and just general bow fishing. And the way I got started in bow fishing was with Marty. Back in 2011, I think it was, I won a silent auction at Hill Country Bow Hunters, and I picked up a gift certificate as part of that silent auction to go bow fishing with Marty, and I took my friend Jake Davis from DB Hunting Ranch with me. He was the head guide at DB Hunting Ranch at the time, and took him with me, and we went to GarQuest Bowfishing Adventures on Lake Stillhouse Hollow. And then subsequently I've gone to North Texas, I've gone to South Texas, I've gone to Central Texas, I've gone all over the place with Marty bow fishing, and it's just been a blast. So it's a lot of fun doing this stuff. Marty's logo or slogan, whatever you want to call it, is saving your game fish one trash fish at a time, and I love it. Because he helps the lakes get rid of rough fish that eat game fish eggs and that kind of, hurt invasive species that kind of hurt fish population in lakes, and has a lot of fun doing it, and we have a lot of fun on this interview together. So I really hope you enjoy this podcast that I do with Marty McIntyre from GarQuest Bowfishing Adventures. Mr. Marty McIntyre, welcome back to the Best of the Outdoors podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We first did this podcast thing back in 2012 with the interviews with the hunting masters, which people can go back and listen to on the Best of the Outdoors. We had a lot of fun when we did that one together. I didn't realize I'd have our own show and everything to do this with later, and I just have so much fun talking to you about bow fishing.
Awesome. Well, it's my passion.
It is, man. I've never met anybody that loves bow fishing and only bow fishing as much as you do. It's just like your world. You know everything about it, and just you're a pro, man, for sure. But you are a professional guy that does this full time too.
Right. I stay on the water as much as possible. Sometimes more than I want to be.
Right. How many days a year do you bow fish? I forget.
I'm bow fishing every weekend at least, but a lot of weeks I get 2 and 3, and I've even been as far as 7-8 days a week straight.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, especially when you host big parties and groups and that kind of stuff, right?
Yes, we do groups. We do a lot of bachelors. The one that sticks out in my mind the best is I had a double date one time.
Really? You never told me this.
More than one time, but this one particular double date I had, the guys and the girls came out, and they had not met. So I think the guys were buddies, and the girls hadn't met before or something.
Right.
But after about an hour, the women were tired of bow fishing, so they went back and sat down and kicked back and relaxed, listened to the radio, and the guys were up there like, "This is awesome. They're not tired, ready to go. We can bow fish all night." And
they're fired up, huh?
Yeah, they were fired up because they were able to bow fish. The women went back and sat down and kicked back and relaxed, and they were getting to know each other. And maybe it was maybe it was the other way around. The women knew each other and the guys didn't. But
right.
They were. The point is, everybody was having a good time.
Right. Bow fishing brings people together.
Right, and even though the women were done bow fishing, they had their feel of it. They weren't ready to go right then. They were content having their conversations and sitting back and enjoying it.
And you've got a great boat set up for that because you've got kind of what do you call that bench seat that you've got in the back of your boat right now?
It's a deck boat is what it is, and I turned it into a bow fishing boat.
Right.
So you've got the bench seat, relaxed, kick back in the back, and the business up front. The whole front end of it is bow fishing.
Right. Yeah. So it's comfortable to ride in style and kind of a deck boat that has nice comfortable seats in it, but then a great deck for doing bow fishing and the bow fishing lights and everything like that. That's what I really like about your boat right now.
Exactly, and that's where I am with it too. I mean, when we turned it into a center console, that really made it, with the rack on both sides.
Right.
Where you can put your bow's out of the way. You don't have to worry about it jumping off into the water.
Right.
It's there.
Easy to walk around and get from one place to another, from the front to the back of the boat. I really like your setup. It's great.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with it also.
No, that's good. And your trips typically last 4 hours or so, correct?
Correct. It's 4 hours on the water, and it just depends on where you go for the price-wise. And I supply all the equipment.
Sure.
I give you a little little briefing and show you how to do it. And that's what I tailor to people that haven't done it before.
Right.
Somebody that's thinking, I'd like to try that bow fishing. Well, it's a perfect opportunity to go out with me, because then I'm going to give you that little class and show you how to do it, and then we're going to get started and we're going to go after some fish.
Oh, that's great. And that's the thing I love about it, because you're such a great teacher, Marty. I learned so much when I first started bow fishing, because you taught me how to bow fish and do it the right way and hold the bow the right way and shoot the right way and aim low and all those different things that are important in bow fishing. So you definitely help beginners to the advanced and expert bow fishers, really have a good time on the water. Well,
it's such a passion for me. I love getting people started in it.
Right.
Because then you can see their expressions and how much they enjoy it. There's been several people that went out and bought a boat the next week.
Right. That's what I was going to lead into is just that people have started doing it on their own now after they come on a guided trip with you.
Yes. In fact, I've got one that gentleman been posted. I took him and his daughter out, and he already had a boat. He already had a big flat bottom boat, but they would brim fish and catfish and stuff like that. But she convinced him to set it up as a bow fishing boat. So now he's got a bow fishing boat too.
So you're basically getting people involved to the point to where they're going out to try this on their own. I love it. I mean, there's just no better sport, when it comes to getting people hooked.
Right. Well, and I've had several women, especially, because they don't like fishing, but they may like hunting.
Right.
And their boyfriend or husband's in hunting and fishing. And I said, this is the best of both worlds. You're
right.
hunting fish. So, and it's not like going hunting for deer where you just sit and wait. At least you're on the movement. You may not see fish all the time, but you see other things.
Right.
You see deer on the bank. You see raccoons, beaver. You see other fish you may not be able to shoot, like what we've been seeing is daggum snapping turtles.
Yes, all over the place.
I love watching them big old snappers move around.
Right. And so basically the basics of how you bow fish in a boat is, you can do the same thing on land, is kind of walk around slowly on land and look for fish in shallow water along the banks to shoot at, and you aim low, think big. But, in a boat, you basically are trolling around the edges of the waterway and looking at the shallows for fish that you can see and shoot at. Is that right?
Correct.
So you use your trolling motor a lot compared to, something like bass fishing and that kind of stuff where you find a spot and you pick up and go. I mean, you spend a lot of time trolling around the lake.
Oh, yeah. I'll cover, my average trip when I turn it on is between 17 and 25 miles.
Wow, that's a lot of time to cover.
Is what my trackers tells me.
Really? Wow. That's great. That's great. And sometimes, like in the case I wanted to talk about on our last couple of fishing trips, we've been fishing Lake Austin late last month of September, and then just this week here in October on Lake Austin for grass carp.
Correct.
And you've been guiding trips down there lately, is that right?
Yeah, I've been doing quite a few trips down there because they opened it up.
Right. Previously, grass carp could not be fished for, bowfish for, regardless, because it was a protected species. And that's kind of a controversial issue with bow fishermen because, we talked about that in detail the other night when we fished together. It's just an issue of, stalking a fish that's an invasive fish to go through and wipe out the hydrilla. But the problem is it wipes out all the native aquatic vegetation as well.
Right. And then, you've got conroes, the same issue.
Right.
Conroes got monster grass carp in them. You got to imagine how much they want to eat. They're going to eat, and now they have absolutely no vegetation. So everything else that lives in that water has nowhere to hide.
Exactly, bass or catfish or whatever, right?
That's why I'm really surprised at all the fingerlings and all the bait fish we've been seeing.
Right, on Lake Austin, for sure.
Because, we see some big old bass.
Right.
They don't look very healthy. They're everything we've seen in there is skinny except the common carp. The common carp's the only one that look like they're enjoying the no grass thing.
But common carp eat anything, let's face it, they're not just resorted to vegetation.
Right. Now, every grass carp we've shot is probably underweight as far as what we would think they would weigh.
Right.
They were 10 and 12 pounds, and we're guessing they should have been closer to 20 pounds just because of their length.
Their length is there, but the weight's just not there on these grassies that we're shooting.
Right, exactly.
That's interesting. And Texas Parks and Wildlife just made that legal along with the city of Austin to shoot grass carp in early September, is that right?
Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, they've been working on it quite a while.
Right, and they've stocked thousands of grass carp, right?
Yeah, and I haven't added that up, but I've heard it was 17,000 grass carp are put in there. Well, they put them in sections. They put some in a long time ago, and then they put some more in and put some more in because the first couple groups didn't take care of the grass problem. They still had hydrilla.
Right.
Well, now they have absolutely zero. Like the other night we were seeing the roots of the hydrilla, but there wasn't nothing on those roots.
Right. It was bare. And
the roots, clumps of roots just sitting there in different sections of that lake, and the grass carp have cleaned them out. We found that one place where they have the grass fenced off, and the grass carp was sitting outside the fence looking at it, watching it grow.
Just picking on what they can, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Get close. I'll suck you out of that fence.
That's right. Just as you grow, that's the way that'll work. And they're so hungry. I mean, they've even eaten the bottoms of all the trees are stripped bare of the leaves.
Exactly.
So it's an overpopulation problem, in its simplest terms. It's an overpopulation problem, but it is a great opportunity in a target-rich environment for somebody that wants to go bow fishing.
I'm not convinced that they're sterile. You've seen those small ones we got. We shot 2 or 3 that was under 3 pounds.
Right, they're smaller.
So where did they come from?
You wouldn't think they were stocked. You would think they were spawned.
Right, exactly.
That's interesting. But, and it's a great opportunity to go help Lake Austin, in that case, or help just any given lake when bow fishing's involved, because you're not shooting game fish, you're shooting, as you refer to them, trash fish or rough fish. You're basically helping clean out the lake from invasive species, and I see that as a great benefit of what you're doing. Plus, you're having a blast doing it at the same time.
Absolutely.
And there's no other sport that gives me that kind of excitement. As far as, it's like bass fishing because you're constantly on the look for fish, but it's like archery or a 3D shoot because you're constantly shooting, and it's like fishing, but it's just a combination of so many different things that I like about bow fishing. Now, I get that for sure. And I mean, that's just it's a blast because you get to have casual conversations. You don't have to worry about spooking the fish. You're constantly on the move looking for fish, and it's just a great opportunity to get out and enjoy the water and enjoy the outdoors. It really is.
Absolutely.
So tell me, let's switch gears real quick. We've talked about carp and gar and the kind of fish that you bow fish for on a general daily basis. Grass carp on Lake Austin. Your 2 lakes that you're mainly on are which ones in Central Texas?
Belton and Stillhouse.
Belton and Stillhouse.
2 lakes.
Okay.
It's the most.
Okay, those are the 2 lakes you fish the most. So they are. I asked you this the other night when we were fishing together. They're not really hurting in population, even though you bow fish them a lot.
Oh, absolutely not. You might get a night to where it's kind of slow, and you start thinking, "Did I hurt the population?"
Right.
But then, if you catch them in spawn, the carp, gar, buffalo spawn, the fish are everywhere.
Right.
I mean, there was a couple times this year that you'd look out, and everything inside the lights, there was hundreds, 500 fish right there inside the lights as far as you can see, just running around. And it's hilarious to see all the, to even think that they're not, you're hurting the population, because they're everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere.
Right. Even on lakes that are heavily bow fish, they're everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And so one of your other specialties is trophy gar. Is that correct? Trophy gator gar?
I do. Yes, I do gator gar trips. They're a little bit more expensive, and we usually go down Livingston, below Livingston, or out to Choke Canyon for those.
Okay, so Choke Canyon, Livingston, those kind of lakes in East Texas and Southeast Texas. And basically you go during the day or the night for those fish, or does it matter?
Well, I mix it up on gator gar.
Right, because your normal bow fishing trips you go at night, but your typical for gator gar you kind of mix it up. Okay.
Right, we'll do some day trip, depending on the temperature. I really like, if they've never went after gator gar, I really like to do it partially day, part of the night. We kind of run it into, because you'll get into, right at dusk, you'll get into a lot of buffalo and carp, and, so there's a lot of other things to shoot other than just the gator gar.
So a lot of action going on, obviously, right?
Yeah.
The only
problem with that picture is, and it happened this year, you've got to, you shoot a fish, and then that big gator gar shows up.
Right.
And it happened to one of my clients. I had just got done telling him, because he was shooting a bunch of little gar, and I said, the only problem with shooting these little gar, you're going to get one on, and you're going to have your arrow in the water, and that big gator gar is going to come up.
Right.
And it wasn't 20 minutes later. He had a gar on. He was having a hard time getting it off his arrow, and this gator gar came in, turned around, looked at us. I mean, he would have had forever to shoot at that thing.
Oh, his arrow was out of the water. Oh no!
And he's got his arrow in his hand with a fish on it, trying to get it off. It was That's exactly what I was talking about. Right there.
Right there. Watch your arrows and make sure it's ready to shoot when the big one shows up. Yeah, and that sounds like something I would do on the water. Be shooting the little ones and the big one shows up.
And it happens quite often, but that's their. I don't care either way. They can shoot at the little ones, and it's fun to shoot at. Like shad. Shad are fun to shoot at.
Oh yeah, I shot at a bunch of those. Yeah, I love that.
They're fast. They jump around a lot. They move. As soon as you think they're going to line up for you and you can get a shot, they cut it left to right.
For those of our listeners that don't know, we're not talking about baby threadfin shad here. We're talking about what we refer to as bull shad. Is that right?
Correct.
The big
correct.
shad.
They're typically some of them are 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds.
Right, just huge. But they typically will come to the light to see what's going on, and then they will just dive right past you. And I've hit a few, here or there, but I mean they like to come in and just dart all around. And I mean it's a target rich environment when there are a bunch of them, but I mean they're hard to hit because they're so fast. You got to put a lead on your shot and make sure that you're dead on. But I mean they're fun to shoot at for real.
Yeah. And they definitely give you bragging rights when you hit one.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Every time I've shot one, I'm like, ha, 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 look at what I got. So, I don't brag much, but I brag on those.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. And then one of the other trips you offer is a tilapia fishing trip. What lake does Texas have tilapia in typically? And just tell our audience how that trip typically works, because that's typically a daytime trip.
Yeah, tilapia is definitely a daytime. I've always done better day fishing for tilapia than I have in the night. Fairfield, or we do it during the week. We do Fairfield. If we do it during the weekend, we can do Fairfield or Gibbons Creek, which is outside of College Station.
Right.
And it's fished the same way, but they're a real weary fish. They know what's going on inside the water and outside the water.
Right, they're very smart.
I've had them come out, and before they'll come, they actually literally look outside the water, I believe. They'll come up. The best time is when you can find a whole bunch of them under some hydrilla.
Right.
And you can, because you'll go into a section of hydrilla, and they'll have little peak holes cut off into these hydrilla patches
where they can see predators. Right.
Yeah, so you sit there and they'll come up in them holes and they'll look at you, and the minute you flinch, they're gone. So you got to move nice and slow, and it's fast shooting. It's the target's not as big as carp or buffalo, but it's really fun because it's kind of, anybody hunts turkey. It's like that. They have very good eyesight.
Right.
Very, very good eyesight. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun, though.
I've equated it before to turkey hunting, and I wrote an article called Hunting Water Ghost, which is what Marty calls them, and I kind of stole the idea from him. But I wrote an article for Texas Fishing Game Magazine back, I want to say it was the summer of 2015 when I wrote that article, and it turned out to be a fun article, had a lot of good feedback on it, but they are like ghosts because they're there 1 minute and gone the next. They're also very tasty table fare. If you've ever had tilapia in a Mexican food restaurant or anywhere else at a fine dining establishment, tilapia is served on the menu a lot, but those are typically farm-raised tilapia, and these are wild tilapia, which I think are even better for you health-wise, and they're just a great fish to eat. They're a great fish to shoot, but they are a smart fish. I mean, that's probably the hardest bow fishing I've ever had there is tilapia, because they can see every moment of every move that you make.
Right, exactly, and they are better tasting fish.
Yes,
a lot better tasting. Their diet is a lot better tasting than the farm-raised
tilapia.
Fed.
Right.
Yeah. And the meat's a lot cleaner and whiter. It's just a better looking fish all the way around.
And so typically if somebody's looking to go tilapia fishing, we're going to recommend power plant lakes typically, because that's where tilapia mainly thrive on, in warm water lakes like that, right?
Correct. Now, and they have found, there are lakes, people think that's the only place you can find them,
right.
But I have found them other lakes which are not power plant lakes. When I first started researching tilapia some 20 years ago, they were saying they would only get up to 2 pounds. They were only found in warm water, bodies of water. Well, the Guadalupe got tilapia in it.
Right. We fished that before. We shot tilapia on that.
San Marcos River's got tilapia, big tilapia in it,
right.
but that's a refuge, so we can't even fish that.
Right.
But
exactly.
it is, those are the 2 coldest bodies of water in Texas, and they've got tilapia in it. In fact, if you look up Lake Record, that's where the Lake Record came out of, or the state record came out of. Not a power plant lake, but Guadalupe.
And we've seen them on the Guadalupe River. We've seen them on the Guadalupe Lakes because we fished Lake Dunlap before, which I was just alluding to, and I shot a tilapia in like 8 feet of water on that lake, and that's probably the best bow fishing shot I've ever made in my life. I just aimed really low and shot and nailed them, and that's a lot of fun. But it's just a blast to hunt for and to find and shoot because they're such a smart fish. They know what's going on. They're very wary, like you said. They're very keen to what we're doing there, and they're like a turkey. It's very true, for sure.
And that's one of the reasons I don't recommend that to be your first bow fishing trip either.
You expect that for people that are a little intermediate, right?
Yes, I've had several people call me and they want to go on it. I mean, I'll take you, but that's not my recommendation if you haven't been, because you have to know your equipment very well. You have to be ready all the time. It kicks up your game too when you're going after tilapia.
Right, and one of the other things you recommended if you don't have a boat and you're near a lake that holds tilapia, like a power plant lake like Calaveras or Brawning in San Antonio, or your Fairfield or your Gibbons Creek, or those kind of lakes that are very well known and very well inundated with tilapia, you can do some wade fishing. Is that right?
Absolutely. I started out wade fishing, and I started out, what I used to have a field day with is taking a ladder and getting into cattails on a ladder,
right,
with a stringer, and I'd sit up there in the cattails with a ladder, just like a tree stand,
right, like a tripod stand, right,
exactly, and sit there right above the cattails, and they'd be, they swim all up inside them cattails, and you just sit there and wait on them, and they'll come in. If you can find them where they're spawning, they're coming in and out, in and out, in and out, right, all the time, all day long.
And they're a curious fish, and the funnest thing about them is that I will sit there and look at fish, and Marty will draw back his bow and shoot one, and I will never have even seen the fish. I mean, it's one of those things you can't point it out because it's too late. They leave a cloud of dust, mud in the water, and they're gone. By the time you point them out and go, oh, look, there's one. Unlike regular bow fishing where you point one out as you're trolling along, this is where you kind of stay stationary and in your boat and anchor up and shoot at kind of a group of them that come in and out because they're curiously looking at you all the time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's usually when I point. Usually, if I point them out, I've got to be pointing them out with an arrow flying.
Right, exactly. There was one.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, what other kind of tips or tricks or whatever, besides going with the bow fishing guide, would you recommend to our audience if they've never been bow fishing before? Because I'm trying to really spread the sport around to the Texas Fishing Game audience, and besides hiring a guide like Marty and going out there and trying it on your own, I think what are some other tips that you have?
Well, and it's if you are going to go out and you're going to pick a guide, find out how long that guide's been fishing.
Yes.
Don't go out with somebody that just says, hey, I'm a guide and come on and go out with me. You might be getting a better deal, better price.
Right. But
in the long run, you're not, because they haven't done half the stuff that they say they've done anyways. If they've only been guiding or bow fishing for 6 months, how are they going to be a guide that's going to know what's going on?
Right. Exactly.
It took me a lot of years. I didn't start guiding until after I was bow fishing for 10 or 12 years.
And you've been a guide for how long now?
I started guiding in 1996
Okay.
here.
So, gee whiz, that's 20 years now, right? 20 years?
Yep. I started bow fishing in 1984.
Wow. 12 years before that. So that's 32 years. Wow.
I was in the military during that time. The military sent me somewhere. I had my bow in hand, and I was in the military, so I bought I could get a state license, a resident license, and I just go to different locations. And some of my best fishing was in Kansas.
Right.
I was stationed at Fort Riley for a while, and they had ox bows everywhere.
Whoa, easy to fish on the bank, right?
Yeah, I throughout Fort Riley, Kansas, they would dig holes and use them for whatever, building roads or something. But I had one space that was maybe a block down from where I worked at, and I'd go down there at lunch and stand up. I say cliff. It wasn't a cliff. It was a high hill overlooking this pond.
Right.
And I was shooting probably 20 foot down, and then buffalo would be swimming around there, and the lake was fairly clear. So I got a lot of shooting in there, and I had it was just starting out. It's always constantly losing arrows. You got to figure out all those curves, but that was one of my favorite spots to fish. And I would go, if it was slow at the lake, I'd go down on the river and shoot suckers, because the suckers, you could stand in one place, and sooner or later the river flow would run them suckers right up to the bank because it would slow down. The current would slow down, so they were trying to get out of the current.
Yes.
And they would get out of the current and get right into my bow range.
So you were just waiting for him to get out of the current and take a shot, huh?
Absolutely, yeah.
So many good stories. One of our best stories that I talked about in the first podcast I had Marty with is the 20. You remember our 24-hour bow fishing marathon we did in 2012?
Yes, I remember it well.
4 lakes. That was Lake Dunlap, Lake Calaveras, Lake Choke Canyon, and
Canyon, yep.
Yeah, we started at Choke Canyon. We went to 3 rivers, and then we went to Calaveras. It was a crazy day.
Yeah, the only thing we saw at Choke that day was snakes.
Yeah, lots of them. Let's not tell that story. I don't like snakes, in other words, folks. So, I got kind of freaked out when Marty was around those snakes. But that was a great trip, and we shot a lot of fish. The best part of our fishing trip there was Lake Dunlap underneath the one of the bridges there, and we loaded up when the gar were spawning. This is March, I think, right? Is that right, Marty?
Yeah.
And
we just
caught them spawning, and we shot 12 fish in under an hour, I think, something like that, right?
Yeah, but that was at the very end of our trip too. We were both
tired.
Dog tired.
We were, because we were up early that morning. We got back early the next morning. I mean, it was wild. So
I picked you up at 4.
Yes.
And dropped you off at 4.
That's right. That's why it was 24 hours, including the driving and everything, because we drove down to South Texas. That was crazy. But that's one of my fondest memories of bow fishing with you, and we had so much fun just going down there and just having a blast and shooting at fish. And I was going to ask you too, just for folks that are wondering how to get started in bow fishing, if you've never done it before, aside from hiring a guide, one of the best bow values is probably to go to an archery store and buy an older used compound, or buy a bow fishing setup that you can adapt to a bow fishing setup, or what would you say about that?
Well, one of my favorites I found, and I've become a pro staff reform, is PSE Discovery 2.
Okay, PSE Discovery 2, okay.
That kit comes with everything you need, plus an extra arrow. So you get the full setup, ready to shoot, plus an extra arrow for $300.
That's great.
And I've been shooting those bows on my boat for customers for 2 years now. And unless they get dry fired 4 or 5 times, they're still good.
Right.
I mean, I trade them out at the end of the year. At the end of the summer, I'll trade them out, and the new I'll get new product for the summer coming up. But they are great bows. They fit everybody, or just about everybody. They're 28-inch draw. So sometimes I got to tell the guys, hey, just draw to the front of your face instead of trying to pull it back to your anchor point. Because, like I had a guy the other day, his draw length was 32 inches.
Okay.
And I said, you can't draw this 32 inches, but you can draw it right at 28. So he was just snap shooting it at 28, letting it go right before he got to his face, and he did real well. He shot a couple fish. So it's just, a matter if you're that big and you've got that kind of arm's length, you just have to adjust and get used to, okay, I can pull back to the front of my mouth and look down the arrow. That works for me, and that's, you got to find that sweet spot. But they're infinite draw, or not infinite draw, infinite poundage. So as soon as you start pulling back, you start getting poundage. They don't have a breakover. They just, it's if it's a 30-pound bow, you're pulling 30 pounds, right? Right after you get a couple inches back, you start pulling that weight, and it keeps it all the way to the back. So it's they're great for snap shooting. They're great for beginners. It takes all the guesswork out of it. It's already set up. It's already got arrows. It's the best. You can go up from there, but that, if you're starting out, that is absolutely the best bow, in my opinion.
And that's around $300 for a new bow kit.
The whole kit.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great price for a new bow. I mean, especially if it's one dedicated to bow fishing. Because there's something else I was going to say is, if you just want to go to a pawn shop and buy a $50 bow and then get you an AMS or a Muzzy, reel seat and reel, or a AMS pro fishing kit or something like that, I mean, you're already stepping up past $100 there, pretty quick. And having a brand new bow, I mean, that's a great value for sure.
And I've been looking at there's an issue with going to the pawn shops and buying a bow. I've been watching that the last couple weeks. They're overpriced to begin with.
Yes, they are.
That $50 bow that you're talking about is a 1989, 90 model, 95 model bow.
Right.
So it's already been sitting. So it's got string stretch. It's got dry rot possibly on the strings, on the limbs. You don't know what closet that person had it in, or if they had it in the garage in the heat.
Right.
So if you got one that you already have, that, say you had this bow for hunting 10 years ago and now you want to retire it to bow fishing, that's great. But another thing, you don't need more than 50 pounds bow fishing.
Exactly. 50 pounds of draw weight is what you mean, right?
Yeah. If you have more than 50 pounds of draw weight, then you have to worry about yanking them out of junk all day long. You seen it the other night. Those were 40-pound bows, and we stuck them in the ground to where we had to turn the boat around and work them out of the mud.
Right. Work them out of the mud, work them out of a fence in one case, work them out of some of that hydrilla preventing sheet and that kind of stuff. I mean, just they're a mess when you shoot them too deep, so you got to shoot light poundage.
Right. Well, and 40 pounds is real good. 50 pounds work, but if you're converting a hunting bow, typically you're at the bottom of the scale if you're at 50 pounds.
Right.
Now, the best recycle bow is a kid's bow. If you can get a kid's bow, their max draw is typically 50 pounds. So that works out real good for you.
So you're talking about like a used Genesis or something like that, right?
Yeah, youth bow. Alpine's made a couple fantastic youth bows that are all the way just to 50 pounds. In fact, I've had 2 or 3 of them that I've used, and I got buddies that still use them.
Right.
That they're a little short. They usually have about a 28 draw length, so you can get around all that. And you can set them up any way you need to. A lot of people put one pin on it so they have a reference point at 10 yards or 20 yards. 20 yards is a little far out, but 10 yards, 10 feet. Set up a reference point. There are some people that use releases. A release typically slows you down.
Yes.
And you may miss a fish trying to get your release on, or usually what happens is if you shoot a release, you get one shot off. If that shot didn't connect, you're reeling in and you're fumbling with the release, fumbling with the arrow, and by the time you get everything set again, ready to shoot, that fish is long gone.
Right.
And possibly, not always, but sometimes you get more than one shot at one single fish.
It doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, you want to be prepared. So.
Right. In fact, I had some clients on not too long ago, and they were shooting releases, and I said, okay, that's fine. And then I explained that to them, and by the time the night was over, they found it. They saw where they were, where it slowed them down.
Right. They saw the difference.
Yes. Now, the biggest benefit a release has is if it's a young person and they're not drawing much weight, they can usually pull more weight poundage with a release than without a release.
Okay, that's smart. That's a good idea. That's right.
Because the release is actually pulling on their wrist,
not on their hand. Right.
Pull with their fingers. Yes, they might not have that strength in their hands yet, but when it's strapped to your wrist, then you have that. You have that strength there.
Okay, that's smart. That's good. And so if folks are just trying out bow fishing for the first time, there's another thing that you have, and it is we don't really use sight pins, we don't really use lasers, we don't really use anything for an aiming device. We shoot instinctively in bow fishing for the most part, at least those of us that have done this for a while, right?
Correct. Yeah, everybody, it's one of the things you get used to. If you get your anchor point correct, you can adjust your forearm to, shoot high or low or wherever you're shooting typically. The anchor point's the most important. And, I get guys that bow hunt, so they're used to a release, and they're like, where do I anchor at? I said, where do you anchor normally? And they'll show me, and I'll say, okay, you're going to anchor just forward of that because you're trying to make up for the release right now.
Right, and that's important, right.
Still pull it to the same spot or same general location. You just have to say, okay, I'm going to stick my index finger in my mouth.
Right, that's what I do.
My mouth.
Right.
Or that's where I do too. Or hit my cheekbone, And women, it really works out for women because a lot of times they'll have that cheekbone, they can pull back to that cheekbone every day, all the time. And I say, as soon as you catch that cheekbone, let go. Just flick it, let it go.
Right.
And so we go, and I've had a few people that it's, there's nothing you can do about it. You just let them fling arrows. But most people are really, really, really close, and then they'll finally get it dialed in, and they're nailing the fish.
Yes. Time after time in a lot of cases. And you tell me that women are sometimes better shots than men. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
They listen well. They listen better than us guys sometimes.
If I say low, they go low.
Right.
If I say lower, every time I say lower, they go lower, and half the time they'll shoot under it. Right. A guy will stop going, I'm low enough. In his brain is telling him he's low enough, so he automatically stops.
Right. Guys got to be stubborn,
That's just the way we're built.
Yeah. Oh, it's great, and it's really fun for all ages. I mean, what's the youngest kids that you recommend taking bow fishing? Because my son's 7, getting ready to turn 8 here in a few months. I'm going to take him with you one of these days. What do you recommend as far as the upper body strength that they need? How old would you suggest a boy or a girl be to go bow fishing?
Usually it's about between 8 and 9, 9 and 10. Somewhere, it depends on every kid's different. Some of them have been shooting, but like yours, if he's shooting a little yard bow, it doesn't matter.
Yes, he does.
That muscle, exactly, that muscle and that muscle memory gets developed at a younger age.
Okay.
If it ends up, in fact, I don't remember how old this young man was not too long ago. I think he was 9, and he was not a real big kid yet. He hadn't started developing, and he could pull the bow back one time, and that was it. That's all he had, and it was cranked down as low as it could possibly be. It just depends on the individual child, but usually it's around 9, and I've had a few 8-year-olds with no issues, but it's usually around 9, I would say.
Okay. That's good to know because, my son shot archery all summer at YMCA summer camp that he goes to during the summer. And then we've done the Hill Country Bow Hunters, which is our 3D club here in Central Texas. I've taken him to those kind of shoots, and he's got a bow that a friend of ours gave to him that's an old Barnett youth bow, which I think is a great bow. It's an older version of it, but Barnett makes some great youth bows just for land shooting. For archery, and just to get your kids started and get them pulling back a bow. I mean, it makes it a lot easier when you get out on the water, to go bow fishing for sure, because they're working those muscles, right?
Yes, and that brings up another thing. The archery in schools program.
Yes.
I've had kids that are in that, and they're 8, 9, 10 years old, and they have no issues pulling the bow back.
Wow, that's great.
That is one of the best courses, and YMCA is probably doing under the same program. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're doing something similar. It's part of their summer camp that they do on site, so they have archery as part of one of their events, if you will, or one of their activities, and that's where he learned this summer. But I think, regardless, just to talk in general about archery, get your kids started shooting young, and get them and enjoy the outdoors, because that's a part of the outdoors that they really will get addicted to. If they stick with it, is bow fishing, bow hunting, anything having to do with archery is a very fun sport.
Absolutely. And that's another thing about if you have a youngin that's not quite into archery yet, you're trying, you love archery and you're trying to get them really interested, bow fishing can be used to spark that interest and kick it into high gear.
Yes.
Because if they get out and they shoot a couple fish, now they know they can shoot a deer or a coyote or a pig.
Right.
That just opens up that whole can of worms, and they get addicted. Like you said, they get addicted to archery then.
Yeah, addicted to the sport. And I love it so much because it's taught me, bow fishing has taught me how to shoot a recurve better. It's taught me how to shoot a longbow better because of the archer's paradox of the where you look versus where your arrow is and that kind of stuff. You're taught to aim low. I mean, it's made me a better archer overall, especially in the traditional or trad archery sports. It's definitely made me a better archer. So bow fishing has a lot of benefits to it besides just being a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Eye-hand coordination.
Yes, absolutely. Hand-eye coordination. Exactly. That's perfect. So, which is another good skill to have. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Marty?
I can't think. I think we pretty much covered it.
We covered a lot. Tell people how they can find you, please.
You can go on Facebook, Garquest Bowfishing on Facebook. That's where I post most of my trips. I also have a website, garquest.com, or you just call me at 254-931-3474.
Great. So I'll put all those numbers and websites and your email address and that kind of stuff in the show notes so people can get in touch with you. And you're based in Central Texas, but you will travel. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And so,
I have fished just about every body of water in the state of Texas.
That's amazing.
There's at least once, there's a lot that I'm not real familiar with, but I've been on it once or twice at least. And I mean, I can look at a map and say, okay, this ought to be a good spot. And,
right.
We usually get on them and, we're doing pretty good.
Have boat, will travel, right? So,
absolutely.
No, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're about at our time today, and I just want to thank you again for joining me. You've had the most popular podcast on my show so far, and hopefully this one will be as well. And I just want to thank you again for taking your time to spend with me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dustin.
Well, that was fun, like all these interviews that I do usually are on this show, and I really enjoy my time with Marty. I enjoy every time I get to go out on a boat with him, whether it's with his clients or just me and him on a lake together. When this podcast goes live, I will have an article that is on our newsletter, our Big Thursday newsletter that goes out to a list of like 46,000 folks. On Bowfishing on Lake Austin with Marty back in September when we went together. I had some pictures that I took and some of the Bowfishing stuff. If you follow me on Facebook, my last name is spelled, well, first name obviously is Dustin, last name is spelled Warncke. If you'd like to add me as a friend on Facebook, I have a posting of our last trip, which was just last week on Lake Austin, and some of the pictures that we took there of grass carp that we shot, and beautiful sunset as well. I did on an Instagram post. If you want to find me on Instagram or Twitter, it's Dustin's Projects or at Dustin's Projects. And you can find me that way and connect with me on there, and we'll have a lot of fun chatting with each other back and forth if you want to correspond with me somehow. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for reading. Thank you so much for following what we do. Again, visit fishgame.com for some of the best outdoor news you will find in the nation, especially when it's Texas related. And we have a lot of great new outdoor writers that are on there, including myself, that are posting articles and blog posts and new original content there every week, which is really cool. And also be sure to subscribe to Texas Fishing Game Magazine if you live in Texas and you haven't done so already. Our magazine is very inexpensive to subscribe to, and I think it's one of the best magazines in the nation, especially one of the best regional magazines in the nation. There's a lot of good content in there every month, and it's action-packed, just full of a lot of great stories and feature stories and columnists that we have that are award-winning columnists, and it's just a great time to be able to be connected with these folks. So, and send me your questions. You can email me at dustin.warncke@gmail.com if you'd like to email me. My last name again is spelled Warncke. And you can email me that way, or you can visit me at dustinsprojects.com and email me through my website there. That's my personal website that has a link to all of my writing and video and that kind of stuff that I do in the outdoor industry. So thank you so much again for tuning in and checking us out, and have an awesome day in the outdoors.